Are university researchers and laboratories now critical assets in the global technology race? How can they turn breakthrough science into economic power, new industries and jobs? Can universities serve as both institutions of higher learning and catalysts for community renewal? I'm your host, Navin Girishankar, and today on Betting on America, I'm speaking with President Paul Alivisatos, the 14th president of the University of Chicago. President Alivisatos, it is indeed a great pleasure to have you on Betting on America. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Navin, I'm just delighted to be here, and I love the title, Betting on America. Let's do that.
Let's do it. You are not only the president of one of the leading premier institutions of higher learning in the world, but you're also one of our nation's most distinguished scientists, responsible for foundational breakthroughs in nanotechnology and applications in biomedical imaging, in solar energy, and others. You have a long list of the most prestigious awards. I just want to read a few of them because I just want our audience to know. I'm sorry,
Sure.
I don't want to embarrass you, but listen, every single scientific honor you can think of, National Medal of Science, the Wolf Prize, the Fermi Award, the Priestley Award, the Linus Pauling Award, Dan David Prize, and the Kavli Prize in Nanoscience. I am really honored to have you in our presence today. And, you know, when you accepted the Kavli Prize, I went and read your acceptance speech. You said there, I'm going to quote, you spoke movingly about the joy of seeing atoms dance and how that image inspired you as a student to explain not only those motions, but, and I want to underscore this, how to use it to build things. And that struck me because it wasn't really just the desire to understand, it was the desire and the passion to apply them to make our world better. So let's start with you. Can you help connect the dots? What's the bright line that connected your journey as a student to one of the most distinguished scientists and the leader of one of our greatest universities?
Okay, so let me start by saying I was a student at the University of Chicago, and then, just like today, we start by teaching students with our core curriculum to think in all the different ways, to look at problems from many sides, to use different modes of thought. And it's very rigorous. So I was in the U Chicago Library one day, and we had an experiment where we were in physical chemistry lab, of all places, where we were growing wires. And there was a way to prove that atoms could impinge anywhere on the wire and move to the end. And it's a funny thing because I'm a student, I'm getting all kinds of inputs, but somehow that image entered into my mind. And I embarked on a journey, which I'm still on with my students, to image how atoms move and form structures on very, very tiny scales. And it turns out we've gotten quite good at that now, and we can use it to build things. And let me say that there's a famous phrase that could help us understand lots of what's happening in science today by the great Richard Feynman, who said, "That which I cannot build, I do not understand."
Wow.
And so Feynman taught us that understanding and building go together, especially in the world of science. And so that's the path that I followed. And just to amplify one last piece on that, that building has extended from using atoms to build tiny structures to also wanting to build with my community in my university, to use the university as a place for building things that benefit society. That they're all connected.
Yeah, I want to come to that second point, but first just to have you in the building, I figured I'd ask you this.
Why not?
Nanocrystals, one of the things that you have discovered.
Yes.
Can you just give us a couple of examples of why would that matter in the real world for regular folks like me or anyone else watching this?
Yes, certainly. Well, one example is that when you have a very, very tiny semiconductor crystal, it can change the colors of light that it emits. Let me give you a quick way to see that. Imagine, if you go to the Science Museum, you can see these balls that are thrown into a parabolic-shaped kind of funnel, and they get faster and faster as the ball goes down that funnel. If you think of a semiconductor, when you excite it and break an electron loose from all the bonds, it zings around inside that crystal. That's a quantum effect. And then that changes its energy, which changes its color, which is how advanced televisions are made. And it's also how we make labels for imaging in biology to be able to see pathology samples, whether they are, benign or malignant, and so on. So that's an example of a tiny crystal behaving completely differently than any other kind of material that then we use in many technologies.
Yeah, and its spillover through many sectors of the economy are evident from what you're saying.
That's right. I mean, unexpected ones. I mean, I think maybe that's an important part for listeners to understand is that universities are places where people look at things that are odd and don't quite fit. They're looking for something that's unusual, and you track them down. And every so often, one of those turns out to be incredibly useful. Most of the time, it just turns out to be, people were wrong. Actually, it all makes sense. But many, many times, it turns out to be, that is an incredibly unusual thing, which we can use. And that's the role that universities play in the ecosystem.
Tremendous. You said something else in your answer there about the university and the communities that the university are in. Tell us your vision for education, educational institutions, and how they are embedded in communities and enrich communities.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think this is one of the things that universities are places, if they're doing things right, they're places of genuine truth-seeking, of curiosity, of discovering these new ideas. But they also are institutions that can serve in their communities as places that strengthen them. So let me give you two quick examples of things that we're involved in. Our university started 20 years ago to explore in a serious way harnessing quantum science and technology. And today it's becoming it's in the nascent stages of becoming an industry. And we're working with others to foster that. For example, we have a tremendous partnership now with IBM. And they are locating a large number of quantum algorithm development scientists and other employees there to develop in our area those kinds of things. That's going to bring enormous benefit to the Chicago region and to the world economy. That's one example. The second one is we are now partnering with the city colleges of Chicago to open a new campus nearby us, and that campus will work jointly and will prepare people for careers in health and medical related careers, and we've committed to hiring a third of them into our hospital system. So, those are examples of the university saying, we're a place of great discovery, but also a place that can help provide the scaffolding that we need to propel ourselves into a successful economy.
There's so much in what you just said. I read a quote of yours, and I'm just going to read it here because I think it captures so well what you're describing, and I just want the listeners to understand this. The university is a place where research and community are not in tension, but are mutually reinforcing. You said that. And you described that just now.
Yes.
And one of the things that resonates with me, I'd love your thoughts a little bit more on this, which is that we are very interested in how local communities are on the coalface of global technology competition. Meaning they're not just local, they're local at the same time. They're influencing the position of our society, our country, our competitiveness globally, which is really powerful. And you described that just now in both the quantum cluster you're developing there, but also in the medical fields. And do you see this catching on in terms of the community understanding, wow, this is the place to be. This is the place to go and look for jobs. This is the place where if I want to build a career, I could start at University of Chicago and I can end up having a whole career there.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that it's that if we look at places where knowledge economies are just burgeoning, there are some factors that come together in those places typically. And one of them for sure is at least one, if not a set of cooperating, very strong universities. There are other components, of course. You want to see a strong corporate sector, you want to see philanthropic engagement, you want to see venture capital that is effective, and very often, of course, some significant public dollars, government investments that drive, help to drive many of these things. So there's a lot of factors that come together, but I think if you're really looking at a knowledge economy as being how you're positioning yourself competitively, then universities are the places where really talented people, it's their duty to be thinking about the new ideas that will change our understanding, and that, of course, is at the root of having a successful knowledge economy. So it all fits together that way.
And I imagine as a university president, like what you're describing, in a way it kind of evolves the job description, because what you have to think about is not just the university, but the community around you and the particular technologies you're trying to develop into potential industries of the future. It's like you're wearing multiple hats, right? I'm sure you're wearing many, but...
So let me say, though, I mean, let's be clear here. The primary hat is to make sure that the university is a place of deep thought, careful scholarship, deep scholarship, to hold on to our values of free expression and so on. Those are really, that's the first thing. But there's more to it, because it is, the American people who invest so much in our universities are asking that there be, that first have that core be genuine as a university, a real place of learning, but also help our society, and do it well. And so, I would say these things feed on each other. For example, when we work closely with IBM on quantum algorithm development, they're at the state of the art. Our faculty and our students are learning ways of thinking all of a sudden that feeds back into their ability to ask a new question suddenly and to make so there's a positive feedback loop when this works well, where the cooperation across the different sectors makes all of us stronger. It's a lot to make that work, but when it does, it's very special. And it's actually, there is a kind of American genius of being able to bring together all these different sectors, each cooperating with the other.
American genius, not only in terms of the laboratories and the research, but in terms of institutions and institution building. I'm so glad you said that. I was having a conversation with Dario Hill, who was the co-chair of the National Science Board. He was at IBM. He's at IBM. But here's the thing. He described it at the National Science Board recently in December. I had gone over to talk with them about institutions, and he said, it is important to reimagine American science and technology institutions and fit for purpose, meaning where we are right now in our history. Look, sometimes, especially in Washington circles, you hear either government is going to drive innovation or the market will take care of it itself. And what you're describing is something a little bit more nuanced. It's actually a number of different institutions coming together in a quintessentially American way, which is voluntarily coming together to solve common problems.
In a public-spirited way.
Right.
I mean, market forces play a vast role in this,
Yes.
so don't get me wrong, but institutions like ours are there to serve the people in the deepest way, and that means we should be trying to foster the economic growth.
I just want to underscore that. So here's one topic that we've been talking to a lot of people about, which is the proverbial valley of death, that you have ideas in the laboratory and there's this bridge to get them to commercial application, and it's not an obvious thing to happen.
How you get from here to there,
Yeah, and for a long time, venture capital has been pointed in the direction of software ventures, but there are other areas where They
Hard
haven't
tech.
been looking at them, hardware and, other types of areas where it's more challenging. And so we may need new tools to do that. But could you,
Yeah.
you've done this yourself.
I
And so
have.
could you describe that transition from the laboratory to commercial
Well,
application?
Yeah. I mean, let me say that, first of all, it's inevitable
Yeah.
that there will be lots of tries and some will fail and some won't.
Right.
Okay. Because, I mean, I just think that, and so we don't want to see a situation where suddenly any actor is coming in seeking to control and guarantee outcomes, because
Right.
we kind of know that doesn't work so well. But on the other hand, many of these questions have to do with how do you efficiently use capital to scope out the early stage
Yeah.
and see which ones should be amplified and not.
Yeah.
So I'll just give you a quick example. Let's say, for instance, that we have somebody who has a wonderful idea, and ordinarily capitalizing it. Let's say there's eight people who have a really great different idea about how to do something.
Yeah.
Do all eight need to fully capitalize right out the gate? Maybe not. Maybe they can use a national lab. That's what's the
Interesting.
that's what's the basis of the Activate system that the nonprofit that helps early stage entrepreneurs use the infrastructure of the national laboratories. Or maybe what we have is a situation where there's some ways in which the university laboratories, which have a lot of investment from the federal government and the university to create infrastructure, maybe those can be used to get things started at the beginning,
Yeah.
so that when the idea is a little bit better vetted, it's
Yeah.
better able to match what the capital markets can provide and get
Right.
out there and compete.
Right.
And in the course of, or maybe we have a situation where we have a joint laboratory, and right there, either right next to or actually really on the university campus, there are scientists and engineers from a company and from the university right there side by side. Maybe they're in the same building, and they have some ability to be in conversation with each other, as well as the ability to go off and do their private things.
Yeah.
Now that enriches everything. So
Yes.
it's not like this was done in the lab, now it's outside.
Right.
It's a much more fluid environment, and I think
Yeah.
universities are learning to be much more skilled at that. So when
Yeah.
Dario says we need new institution building, those are the kinds of things that I think he probably has in mind. That let's cooperate across the different parts, but let's not assume that one isn't necessary. And one thing I do want to say, because it's been circulating around in some of the discussions these days that I find a little bit troubling, is the notion that fundamental discovery is suddenly going to be picked up by the private sector.
Yeah.
And I would just say, I think that would be a wrong decision by the CEO of a private company to start trying to do the open-ended kinds of research that a university does. It's not a good use of the private monies.
I'm
So
so
I
glad
would
you
not
raised
I
this.
would not like to see us go in that direction. I just don't think it's a smart direction. We have efficient search machines. They do get public monies to do that. But when they find something great, they hand it to private sector
Right.
and it takes off. And the whole world is looking for good models for how to do these things. We've got one.
You got one. Yes, the U.S. has one. I'm so glad you raised this as well, because I had Senator Young on here in one of the
Yes.
previous episodes.
Yes, a big fan of quantum.
Yes,
as far as I know.
absolutely. And also, he underscored this point, and I just wanted to use this as a segue to a conversation about
Sure,
government. He
sure.
said, if you look at public R&D in the U.S., it's since the mid-'60s, it has fallen. But private R&D has risen. The thing is, they're doing different things.
They're doing different things.
They're doing different things, and people sometimes miss that point. And so when you look at something like the CHIPS and Science Act, the science part wasn't really funded. And it's a worthwhile discussion as to what the future of public funding of R&D is. And I just want to underscore that if we're interested in effectively competing with some of our, let's say, adversaries even, they're investing significantly in public R&D, including the PRC, and we are seemingly taking our foot off the pedal. So I just wanted to push this question and see your reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a natural enough tendency to think, well, the private sector can develop ideas and run with them.
Yeah.
But let's take examples.
Yeah.
So if we look at CRISPR-Cas9,
Yeah.
no one said, I would like a therapy for sickle cell. Actually, what happened is a microbial geochemist
Yeah.
was studying the bacteria in abandoned mines in Africa where the acid concentrations were super high and there were many heavy metals, and these bacteria seemed to be doing just fine. And through a series of how did this possibly happen, they found that there was a genome editing, and then the genome editing, boom, 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 it became Cas9, CRISPR-Cas9, and before you knew it, it was capitalized all over the place. But that didn't happen from somebody saying, I want a genome editing technology. It happened from somebody trying to understand the world around us. And there's example after example after example of that. Once the idea is there, look at today's AI.
Yeah.
When I was an undergrad at the University of Chicago, we were reading John Hopfield's papers on what a neural network and the statistical physics look like, and thinking, that's pretty interesting. Today, it's the basis of the future of our economy.
Yeah.
I just think it's really important to understand that the private piece takes off, but it happens once there's something to work with that's a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And those breakthroughs are happening in universities every day.
So as a layperson, I want to just underscore one thing, if I understand it correctly, and you correct me if I'm wrong. We're in a world where there is a strong push for mission-driven research.
Sure.
Okay, so there's the technology competition with China, so we need chips, we need quantum, we need AI, so let's drive mission-driven research. But even as we do that, I think you're reminding us that, the best payoff is that curiosity-driven research. You don't know where it's going to end up. Its payoff may not be obvious right now, but through time, you can tell it's obvious. And let's not forget that piece of it. Is that right?
It's a balance. There's a portfolio approach. And if you don't have the curiosity-driven pieces, you don't know what you're not. Let's be clear here. We have a lot of knowledge today, and sometimes it's overwhelming just to realize how much knowledge we have. I'd like to remind everybody there's more that we don't know than that we do. And there's not some end to what we can understand about the world around us. And so that curiosity-driven piece, now look, it has to be managed well. And I think there's a really good discussion to have about how do we make sure that the curiosity-driven piece of the research is done well? How do we make sure the handoffs are good? Can we make the system improve? Sure.
Yeah.
But the notion that somehow scientists in a pharma company who have the duty to use the shareholders' money to produce value within a certain amount of time, the notion that they're going to do the sort of curiosity-driven strange things that happen inside universities, which unexpectedly turn out to be important, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You touched on we're talking about the role of government here. We're in an interesting moment. There's, I think, a legitimate concern about the efficiency and effectiveness of public expenditures in many, many
Everywhere.
arenas,
Yeah, sure.
including in science and technology.
Sure.
And at the same time, when you see significant budget cuts anticipated for the National Science Foundation, it does raise questions like, are we making these cuts in a way that have the long term in mind? This question of curiosity versus mission-driven or user-driven research, are we striking the right balance? And I think there's been some consternation about this, and I just wanted to get your thoughts because as a university president of a major research university, how do you think about this?
Well, look, I think we have a long track record of success from the kinds of compact that I was describing with the different sectors and the universities playing their role. It is a time to re-examine things. I think that's healthy. There's lots of ways to do things better. But there's one thing that I feel quite urgent, which is let's speak to the young scientists and engineers. The National Science Foundation, supports young people when they begin their science careers. Let's make sure we're speaking to them. And when they see massive uncertainty, and when they see the kinds of cuts that are being discussed, which are more than half of the budget being reduced, they're going to draw a conclusion about whether they can make a bet on something that they think is really important, that they're passionate about. Will they be able? Will they be able to follow that dream? Yeah. So I think it's urgent to speak to that young generation, and to say, America is a place where great science will happen, great discovery will happen, and we're going to back you because you're talented. And run it for merit, make it an intense competition and all those things, but speak to them.
It's really interesting because what you just said resonates strongly with the letter that President Trump wrote to Michael Kratsios,
yes,
about the future of the American science and technology system.
Indeed.
And I think that's the spirit in which that letter is written and what you're saying.
Yes.
So there must be a path
forward here. There's a path there.
There's a path, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about the other dimension of it. If the university is to be the vibrant, living organism that it is, and American universities are truly the envy of the world, there's also questions around the role of international students and attracting brain power from the rest of the world. My own family came here in the early 70s, and within a generation, an American is created. And part of that is the attraction of the U.S. university system and the U.S. science and technology system. Could you give us your thoughts on this?
Sure. Well, Navin, similar kind of story. My father was a refugee from the Greek Civil War after World War II. And so, like so many in the world of science, it was a journey of a family of immigrants. So, that speaks to me. Your story speaks to me very, very powerfully. Look, the fact is that as we think about our nation's future, how America is the strongest possible, we happen to have, because of all the things that we've described, because of the freedom we have, because of our incredible design of these interlocking, reinforcing institutions and systems, and because of our openness, we have a brain surplus.
Yeah.
We have the brain surplus.
Yes.
And that brain surplus serves us very, very, very well. We have the most brilliant people coming here, so many of them staying and becoming entrepreneurs, some staying in the universities being scientists that make breakthroughs, some going into the commercial sectors in different ways, some going into the worlds of finance, all different directions like that. I think that brain surplus is something that we should be zealously cultivating. For sure, there are issues around security and other things that can be managed and need to be managed, but the surplus itself is serving us very, very well. And it's at risk. It's at risk. Uncertainties around the processes of immigration and how they're working, and the concerns around what the science funding will be like. Those things can disrupt that brain surplus.
Yeah.
It's important to take care of it.
Yeah. And, my own observations and what I've heard is that other countries are also competing for the world's brain power.
Sure.
And so we need to preserve, what we've built over decades and decades and decades. You mentioned security. I need to ask you this because one of the themes that we've been exploring through this podcast is that we're in the midst of a must-win technology race because there are all kinds of national security implications across the technologies we're talking about, the ones you've innovated in your career, but other ones as well.
Yeah, sure.
And as a university president, how do you think about balancing creating this vibrant ecosystem where the world's best minds come with these national security imperatives and research security, I should say? How do you balance those?
Well, again, our ecosystem is quite extensive. We have, for example, some amazing national laboratories
Yeah.
that the Department of Energy runs. Some of them are open science, like the one
One of
that
which you ran.
I was director of Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and for a while I was also chair of the National Lab Directors Council. And so I've seen up front all of the diversity of national labs that the Department of Energy runs, as well as many that DoD runs, and so on. So we have a range of institutions which take the questions at hand on the science and technology and work on them in the context. If it's in a security context, it works in a very different way than if it's in the open science. I will say that for the United States, we have outcompeted when we are in an open mode. We do that very, very well. We do have the ability to have things that are secure and to do those things, but we've run our science piece openly, and we've just done it better than everybody else.
Right.
And we do it better than everybody else consistently, over and over, faster and better, and that's because of our openness and the degree to which we foster these different kinds of institutions. So that's been our approach to that. Now, I do think it's a good idea to look carefully at all the different dimensions of how people come to this country and make sure that but once people are here, having freedom inside a university helps a student to achieve the most and to do the best. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. Well, I think the tension that I'm hearing is that there are specific areas, very specific areas, and where research security is an issue.
Sure.
And I'm assuming that
Sure.
in a private university, there's still a way to address that simultaneously with the openness that you've
Sure.
talked about. Yeah.
Sure there is. I mean, our university doesn't do a whole lot of classified research, but there are others that do. And they have very well set up structures for doing that.
Yeah.
And I think that they've benefited the nation enormously. So
Yeah.
we have good ways for handling that, and we should honor those.
Yeah. We're in some ways in a challenging moment in the country when it comes to government and universities. And there's the case of Harvard, there's the case of other universities. How do you, as the president of the University of Chicago, navigate this? And what are the issues at play when you look at this set of challenging interactions between government and universities?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Let me start by saying that the one thing that I carry with me every single day is what my University of Chicago college education did to help me understand the world and to also teach me how to be a part of trying to serve in my society. It taught me that by teaching me how to think like a humanist, like a social scientist, like a scientist, to study a civilization in some depth, and to take all those things together and then bring those to trying to understand the world. A place of give and take, of debate, of genuine debate, a place of desire to understand and to learn. So every day I think about the gift that was given to me, and every day I think about how that's what we have to redouble and quadruple on. That idea of teaching people to think from many different perspectives, of finding joy in disagreeing with others agreeably and learning from others, accepting that there will be different points of view, sometimes highly contested. Sometimes people will say things that are offensive, but never, never will we allow disruption of learning. Those are some of the core ways in which we foster a great university at the University of Chicago. Those are things that we take very, very, very seriously. That's our core. That's who we are. And we have to commit and recommit and recommit. And those are struggles. And we can sometimes fall short, and then we have to be willing to go back and look at those and fix it. What I will say is I'm deeply concerned when we're in a situation where the federal government is now going to be potentially involved in decisions around curriculum, around who's hired at a university, and so on. The genius again of the institution building that occurred when our universities were created, at least for the private ones, was that those kinds of values I described were animating them, and that they created private structures that did that. And we should be focusing on that, trying to be as strong as we possibly can in that. I'm very concerned about the federal government having that kind of reach inside private institutions. So we will redouble our efforts at all times to make sure that we honor what we're here for, and also that we protect it.
Let me talk about the current administration's policy on science and technology, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
There's trade issues. We can touch on that. There's issues around budget cuts and so on and so forth. But there is something that I think is potentially really, really promising, and it's worth discussing, because when you take some elements of the president's letter to Kratsios and his tasking of Kratsios on science and technology, two, if you take the AI innovation executive orders of various executive orders, the energy executive orders, and you put these together, and you look at the AI stack, these are like almost the composite of all the elements of competitiveness that the United States needs.
Yes.
And if we do that well,
Yes.
we could do it in other technologies.
Yes.
And universities have a critical role in this.
Yes.
So I wanted to get your reaction, because I think there's an element of
I
something
think that's
exciting.
wonderful. Look, I mean, I think that right now we're in this moment of the exploration of what AI-based tools will do. And I think that thinking with machines is something that will accelerate science. I started by mentioning the Feynman quote that,
Right.
that which I cannot build, I do not understand. So what we have right now is multiple revolutions going on. We've got my field, nanoscience, the ability to control materials at the molecular scale. We've got what we talked about a little bit in the biotechnology arena, the ability to control macromolecules and cells and entire biological systems, microbiomes and so on. That's emerging. We've got the quantum things that are going on, allowing us to control information in a new way. And all of those are being accelerated by AI, which helps people to think about problems in new ways. I mean, we're just we're at this moment in science that's just extraordinary. I mean, I just can't imagine an environment that's more conducive. And I do agree with you. I think what's been laid out in the Kratsios letter and in several of the other statements that you just mentioned, the different orders and so on, and the statements by the various people in the roles there, is breathtaking in its possibilities. So we should head in that direction.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what process is laid out, so in institutions like yours and others can be part of a process of setting the mission for the country and what their contribution is to that. That's something that I think I'm looking out for, and I'm sure many others are.
I just want to say again, speak to the young people.
Yes, yes.
Those are great things, but what we need is young people from across the United States, all the different parts of the country, who are curious and who want to do things that are important for our future. And we need to also speak to young people who want to come here and contribute. Both of those, we need to speak to them, and so the sooner the better.
That's excellent. Listen, this podcast is very much around the fact that everybody has a role to play in the technology race and the advancement of technology for the betterment of our society. And I think you ended it there really well with like the people that matter most are the next generation.
Yeah.
Give us maybe your thoughts on where you think science and technology policy can go in a way that's productive for the country, for these goals that we laid out.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that we are in a very intense global competition. We are in a moment of profound change in our society, a lot of re-examination of institutions. And that's a very healthy thing, to re-examine institutions and to see, are they serving, and to ask them to take a hard look at themselves, perform better. But we do know that the different kinds of institutions that we have that have been formed very often by private individuals or by publics in a very public-spirited way. The institutions we have for education and for higher learning, the universities that we have, are the best in the world. They are the best in the world. And as we are competing in a future knowledge economy, let's ensure that the universities remain deep, truth-seeking places, places of deep scholarship, places of really thinking about the hardest problems. And if we do that, they will contribute in a very substantial way to the future competitiveness and to the thriving of the American people.
That's American exceptionalism. And you are an exceptional American. President Alivisatos, thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Navin.
joining us and for your inspiring message. And we'll be watching what you're doing in University of Chicago going forward.
Thank you, Navin. It's a joy to be with you.
Thank you for joining us for this illuminating conversation with President Paul Alivisatos. You can find this episode and more on CSIS.org, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Navin Girishankar reminding you that everyone has a role to play in the global technology race.